The Wagner revolt in Russia raises concerns about Putin's power and the stability of the Middle East and Africa. On June 24, fighting escalated due to rain between the top Russian army and Wagner Group mercenaries. Wagner's head, Yevgeny Prigozhin, bravely crossed the famous Rubicon, casting a shadow over Moscow's ability to launch a counterattack against Ukraine. Prigozhin denounced the Russian army on social media, accused its commander of hypocrisy, and sent mercenaries again from Ukraine to the city of Rostov-on-Don in southern Russia to plan a trip to Moscow. In response, Vladimir Putin addressed the country, condemning the backstabbing and urging security forces to quell the armed insurrection. Later that day, Wagner's manager withdrew the work and accepted the offer of Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. Shortly after, Russia's security agency, the FSB, announced that it was withdrawing all claims of military operations against the Wagner Group. But the incredible result of the Wagner franchise operating independently in Africa and the Middle East will pass. Beijing noticed. The MENA region's mere network of mercenaries loyal to Prigozhin, or worse, the Wagner Group's free-floating separatist faction in Africa, poses a real and present threat to China's BRI. Either way, there is no direct communication with Moscow to discuss the red line that must not be crossed. Shortly after the military coup began, Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov became Putin's first ally to support Moscow, dispelling doubts about his own ties to Prigozhin, a relationship that was completed in the early years under Putin. Invade Ukraine. Tehran, another Russian ally, does the same. Foreign Minister Nasser Kanani said that the incident in Russia is an internal matter of the country, and that the Islamic Republic of Iran supports the rule of law in the Russian Federation. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan showed control and courtesy in a phone call with Putin while waiting for Beijing time. On June 25, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that the Wagner incident is in Russia's internal affairs and that China supports Russia for a stable and successful country development and progress. But the ongoing crisis and uncertain future of Prigozhin, head of the Belarusian Wagner Group, will not affect the work of Wagnerian mercenaries from Benghazi to Darfur, where Chinese mining companies have a growing footprint. The ongoing investigation into the deaths of 9 Chinese workers in the Central African Republic continues. The transfer to Rostov-on-Don and the sudden U-turn reveal Russia's weakness, when there was just another chapter in the evolution of Moscow's relationship with its mercenaries. The inability of the mercenaries to advance in the main strategy in the southern region. The stinging attacks of the military command Prigozhin against the oligarchs and the incompetence and greed at the top of the army were also echoed in the Russian public. But President Wagner may have gone beyond his understanding by challenging Putin's narrative of the invasion of Ukraine and the point of no return. In this unfavorable position, Wagner's veterans of the siege of Bakhmut consolidated their position in Rostov-on-Don and slowly moved north towards Moscow, with their final destination only 500 kilometers from the city of Voronezh. But the real question that has arisen since Russia's invasion of Ukraine remains unanswered: where is the Russian Air Force? There may be a heavy army of soldiers with tanks, anti-aircraft lights, and some surface-to-air missiles, Wagner said, but long-range missiles, fire and weather protection are not part of their business. Therefore, a convoy of mercenaries heading for Moscow will be easy to attack in the air, unless an unconscious decision is made long before Lukashenko allows Prigozhin to commit a crime. While the Biden administration spent months deciding whether to designate the Wagner Group as a terrorist organization, Putin took charge, mandating the military to act as a terrorist organization and create anti-crime laws in Russian cities. Lukashenko's promises of protection will not last long, and Prigozhin may continue his previous policy of retirement in Africa, where his men are welcomed in many countries. In My Russia, War or Peace? The Russian-Swiss writer Mikhail Shishkin illustrates the importance of the observation. Russia always protects the life of the government when defeat nears collapse. The Tsar looks weak after Putin condemns the military attack in a televised speech. Putin's biggest concern right now is not the 25,000 Wagner soldiers sent to Belarus, but the large number of Russian soldiers, police officers and regional leaders who ignore the entry of Prigozhin's men into Russian soil. Even in Russia's tightly controlled media, Putin's stable power base is beginning to show signs of instability. Russia uses mercenaries as a professional tool to serve its regional interests and criminal needs until it returns to Moscow. By acting outside the command of Russia's military and security services, Putin was able to keep the military on the alert, but failed to do so after Prigozhin's ascension. Now the genie is out of the bottle and Putin's exploitation of the Wagner Group is spiraling out of control, threatening its power. It is an unchanging fact of history that investors in war will make a quick impact, but give up their leaders more quickly when money falls. While the situation is yet to be seen, one thing is certain. The shock of this seismic shift will be felt across Africa and the Middle East. All the benefits of crossing the Rubicon have not yet been experienced. Alessandro Arduino is Associate Professor at Lu China Institute and King's College London. He is the author of Money Creates Chaos, Mercenaries, Private Military Corporations, Drones, and the Future of War. Wagner director Yevgeny Prigozhin's protest against the Russian military leadership ended as quickly as it began on Saturday night, 24 hours ago. The details of the agreement between Prigozhin and the Kremlin are still unknown, but the Russian military seems to be out of the drama, at least for now. It's a different story for Vladimir Putin, whom everyone hated and who now looks weaker than at any point in his 23 years in power. While the offensive itself may be brief, its consequences could reach, at least in the case of Russia's already faltering invasion of Ukraine. The most obvious consequence of Wagner's departure is the weakening of Russia's physical power in Ukraine. More than 20,000 of Wagner's troops were reportedly withdrawn from Ukraine to join the uprising, making up about 5% of Russia's total uprising. Most importantly, these units are by far the best combat units in the Russian army and are responsible for almost all of the advances in recent years. Depending on the specifics of the agreement to end the fighting, it seems that many Wagner warriors will return to the front and possibly be placed in the Russian army. However, his non-Wagnerian friends and leaders will understandably be skeptical of them, limiting their influence to the battlefield. Whatever happens next, it seems like the days of Wagner's Russian military-led invasion of Ukraine are over. The attack also shows Russia's relative protection. It took nearly a year for Wagner's army to capture the small Ukrainian town of Bachmut, but within a few hours Wagner defeated him without a fight and captured the Russian town of Rostov, which was almost 20 times its size. In fact, it is worth noting that Rostov-on-Don is the largest city captured by the Russian army since the start of Putin's so-called special military operation 16 months ago. The lack of internal defense in Russia was further revealed by the failure of Prigozhin's armored division, which, after encountering little opposition before deciding to turn back, advanced to within 200 kilometers of Moscow. Although the threat of an urgent march on Moscow is now over, it is clear that more drastic measures are needed to strengthen Russia's internal security. Putin knows that the world sees this negatively. Now he needs to quickly take simple steps to prevent another Russian military leader or Ukrainian military leader from launching new attacks on his vulnerable territory. Where will Putin find the troops and equipment he needs? The answer to this question is obvious and embarrassing, given that the majority of Russian troops are currently deployed in Ukraine. To resolve serious national security problems, Russia has no choice but to reduce its reach. Russia's military and state security agency will now find itself preoccupied with hunting down rebels and traitors, resulting in insufficient trust and resources from its mission to conquer Ukraine. Clashes between various armed groups had a negative impact on Russia's intervention in Ukraine. This change will now be more drastic as the Russian authorities seek a solution, with several police chiefs, city officials, and military leaders either refusing or standing up to support Wagner's fight. The rebellion, meanwhile, raises some important questions about Putin's ability to stay in power. He did not come especially in the first hour of the crisis. He was only featured in a short video for the country in the morning. It also appears to have been abandoned during negotiations with Prigozhin, leaving the post to Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko. These are not the actions of a strong leader. As John Herbst, senior director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasian Center and former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, told CNN, Prigozhin is like the man behind the screen watching The Wizard of Oz. Man, see that the good and bad Oz is exactly that. The man was very afraid. Putin was famous for this.